Syracuse football is 5-1, but they can still improve in some areas.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, Syracuse football is 5-1. They are sitting in a pretty good spot, but they can still improve in some areas of the game. Yesterday, we talked about the strengths, what they are good at overall. And trust me, there's been a lot more good than there has been bad. But at the halfway point, there are still some areas where this team can get better. We're going to talk about the pass coverage and tackling. We're going to talk about special teams. And yesterday, we went over the good parts of this coaching staff. But today, where the coaching staff can also improve here on this edition of Locked On Syracuse. And this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So, Syracuse's pass coverage and tackling, in my opinion, I think it can be better than what it has shown at the halfway point. And let's start off talking about the secondary, because when we get to the tackling aspect, I don't really have the advanced metrics for it. It's more of eye test, but with the secondary, I can give you more metrics on it. Okay. So let's talk about the secondary. Syracuse football as a team allows 229 passing yards per game. And for some context, that is 10th in the ACC. So 10th in the ACC is not great. Obviously it's in the bottom half, but it's also not horrific, right? It's not the worst pass defense in the conference. However, I think you have to take into account the opponents that Syracuse has played. Not that the opponents that Syracuse has played are bad. I'm not trying to minimize the competition of Syracuse. They've played 3 conference games. They've played 2 ranked teams overall. It's not that they've played poor competition, but when you look closely at the competition they have actually played, you'll notice one thing that they really all have in common, and that's that they don't have strong passing attacks, okay? And the numbers, they back this up. So I looked up where each team that they've played sits within their own conference, aside from Holy Cross, okay? I don't care about an FCS school. Ohio, all right? That was the first game of the season. The Ohio Bobcats are second worst in their conference in passing yards per game. Georgia Tech is 10th in the ACC in passing yards per game. Stanford, last in the conference. Holy Cross, as I mentioned, is FCS. UNLV, a ranked team on the road. They are still bottom 3 in their conference in passing yards per game. And then NC State, who Syracuse just beat, is 12th in the ACC in pass yards per game. So, Syracuse, once again, being 10th in the conference in pass defense on face value isn't great. It's not terrible. However, when you consider the competition in terms of passing numbers that the teams they're going up against have, it's not very good. It's something that they definitely have to improve on at the second half of the season, or at least for the second half of the season, because look, it's going to get tougher defending the pass. They got Pitt next week. Pitt is 3rd in the ACC in passing yards per game. They got Eli Holstein, who's slinging the ball around right now. Didn't have the greatest game against Cal, but for the most part, he's been very effective this season. And then, of course, Miami at the end of the year is the number 1 passing attack in the country, led by Heisman contender Cam Ward, right? Cam Ward having an exceptional year. Slowing down Miami is not going to be easy, and it's certainly going to be tougher than any of the opponents that Syracuse has faced so far this season, all right? Now, it's not all doom and gloom. I think there are a couple of things that can help this secondary out. Number 1, getting Marcellus Barnes back. Marcellus Barnes, the 4-star true freshman, he was one of Syracuse's highest-rated defenders in the first 2 games of the season before being knocked out of the game against Stanford fairly early in that game. Thought he was going to come back last week against NC State, but he was a late scratch. I think he did participate in warmups, but again, late scratch, didn't come back. Hopefully, he is good to go for Pitt. So getting arguably your number one cornerback, I think is definitely going to help this secondary out, especially against a team like Pitt. And number two, this is unsung. You might not really realize it, okay? The pass rush. The pass rush has to get home for this secondary to be better. And I think it can improve. Here's where it can improve, all right? Because they don't, at least by eye test, all right? They don't generate a ton of pressure. Is that fair to say? Syracuse doesn't generate a lot of pressure when you're watching a game, right? Generally, that's how it is. And obviously now there's a lot of injuries on the defensive line, so it's not going to be easy there. However, Marlowe Wax, all ACC linebacker, could be back for the Pitt game. I think he will be. That was what the timetable suggested when Fran Brown originally said it was going to take him 6 weeks. All indications online seem to be that he is trending in the right direction for the Pitt game. It's going to help out the secondary because it's going to help out the pass rush. Here's why it helps the pass rush, okay? Marlowe Wax is not some blitzing middle linebacker, all right? But Fadil Diggs, you can make an argument, is the best defender on Syracuse. That includes Marlowe Wax. However, Fadil Diggs is a defensive end who's, since the injury to Marlowe Wax, has had to play a lot of linebacker as well. If you'll notice, sometimes he'll drop back and be a quarterback spy. Well, having Marlowe Wax back means that Fadil Diggs can pin his ears back more often and just go rush the passer. That'll help out the pass rush, which in turn will help this secondary improve in the second half of this season. So once again, the numbers don't look great for Syracuse, and they honestly look worse when you consider the competition that they have played. They have not played the most elite passing attacks in the country. But getting Marcellus Barnes back and getting Marlowe Wax back on defense should help the secondary when they are facing the tougher passing attacks in the conference, like a Pitt coming up and Miami at the end of the season. All right. So that's the secondary portion of this segment. Let's just talk about the tackling real quick. It's got to be better. Like I said, I don't necessarily have the advanced metrics for you, but I do have examples for you of missed tackles. I mean, Syracuse in the first game of the season, they missed 19 of them against Georgia Tech, against Ohio. They missed 19 tackles against Ohio. Obviously, that's a lot. For context, the next week, Syracuse definitely cleaned it up against Georgia Tech with only 6 missed tackles. But look, missed tackles are going to happen. I feel like they're letting them happen just a little bit too much. Just a little bit too much. Do you recall that 72-yard play from NC State at the end of the game in the fourth quarter where it started as like a 4-yard check down, and then all of a sudden there were 4 whiffs later and the guy almost housed it? Got 72 yards on the play. It led to an NC State field goal. Credit to the defense for forcing that field goal. But still, I mean, put the fear of you-know-what into all of us. So the missed tackles got to be better. And once again, I think Marlowe Wax coming back from injury, an all-ACC linebacker, is certainly going to help that out. All right. I think the main takeaway maybe of this entire segment is get Marlowe Wax back on the field because he's going to help out this defense tremendously. All right. So the 2 areas where I would like to see improvement in Syracuse, the pass coverage and tackling. Once again, getting Marcellus Barnes and Marlowe Wax should help pass coverage because that'll help the pass rush. And, well, tackling Marlowe Wax, all conference linebacker, will certainly help that out. All right. So that does it for pass coverage and tackling. Now, where's the next area that Syracuse can improve upon in the second half? The special teams. Let's talk about it. Basketball season is just around the corner, and whether it's the NBA or college, just like Syracuse, going to basketball games is always exciting, and the way I get tickets for games is by using Gametime. Gametime is a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. In Gametime Picks, it filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And my favorite feature is the curated deals. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. And you can take the guesswork out of buying any sort of tickets you like with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I think we can all agree that special teams for Syracuse football, at least at the halfway point, hasn't exactly been the strong suit, and that's putting it lightly, okay? It's putting it lightly. And really, it's an all-around issue. There hasn't really been one area of the special teams that you would say, yep, that's been good. But there have been certainly more bad moments in some areas than others. Let's start with the block punts. There were two of them against Georgia, or there was one against Georgia Tech, two against UNLV, although one of them against UNLV was, I've said this before, it was so bad that Jack Stonehouse didn't even get the punt off. He tried to avoid a block punt, but ended up getting tackled for a 13-yard loss, which ends up affecting your yards per carry because it went as a rushing loss. But that's why you have to avoid yards per carry. But that's, again, the discussion that I had on yesterday's podcast when I talked about running the football has actually been kind of a strength for Syracuse this season. Now, luckily, that block punt against Georgia Tech, it didn't actually hurt them in that game. I know that obviously Syracuse won, but on that drive for Georgia Tech, they did not score off the block punt. But against UNLV, granted, Syracuse won the game. We're all happy about that, right? They found a way to win, which I referenced on yesterday's podcast, that even when there's adversity, they have been finding ways to win for the most part, aside from the Stanford game. Found a way to beat UNLV, but those two block punts led directly to touchdowns. On the one where Jack Stonehouse got tackled, the next play was a touchdown because it was a goal-to-go situation, and I don't put that on the defense. First and goal, they score a touchdown off a short field. It happens, right? That's not on the defense. You'd like to hopefully hold them to a field goal, but that's what happens when you give a team a short field. That's what happens when you give a team an instant goal to go. The second block punt was directly a touchdown because the block punt itself was actually a touchdown. The ball bounced in such a weird way where UNLV just picked it up and ran right to the house. So that's 14 points against UNLV. Again, luckily it didn't cost them the game, but it nearly cost them the game, and that's something that Syracuse has to correct going forward. They cannot have those block punts when they're going up against Pitt next week, or they're going up against Miami, or really any ACC team left for that matter, because they'll punish you. They will. That's how you lose, right? Don't want those to happen. Got to improve in that area. Block field goals. And this is definitely not on the coaching staff, by the way. These block field goals, there was one against Georgia Tech. There was one against Holy Cross, I believe. And both of them were very similar kicks. They were short field goals that were blocked at the line of scrimmage. And again, this is not on coaching this aspect because the kicker just, in this instance, I think both of them were from Brady Denneberg. He didn't kick the ball high enough. When you're a kicker and the field goal is really short, let's say it's 20 yards, even 25, 30 yards, a really short field goal, a Division I kicker, even a high school kicker is going to have the leg to make the kick. They do. There's a reason why they're kickers. They have the leg to hit a 30-yarder. Now, I can't kick a ball 30 yards, but a Division I kicker can kick it 30 yards. But on those short field goals, the kicker's job, because they know they're going to have the leg to make the kick, is to hit a pop-up. Hit a pop-up to center field. That's what they're supposed to do. Because, again, you're going to have the leg. All you got to do is get it over the defensive linemen who are jumping to block the kick at the line of scrimmage. That's all you got to do. And on both those instances, I believe it was Denneberg both times, hit a line drive to center field, which in turn gets blocked. Happened against Georgia Tech, and it even happened against Holy Cross. So that's something that can't continue. Short field goals, especially short field goals, you got to make them. You cannot have block field goals there, and I don't put it on coaching because I just explained to you that's on the kicker for just not executing. Okay? Missed field goals in general have been a little bit of a problem for Syracuse, and they definitely need to improve in the second half of the season. And it goes to Brady Denneberg and it goes to Jaden O, who have attempted 10 field goals combined through 6 games. Denneberg is 3 for 6, and Jaden O is 2 for 4. So both are converting at 50%, and that means overall they're at 50%, which is not good. Not good at all. And this isn't something that's out of the blue. Brady Denneberg last season was 10 of 16, which is 62.5%, and that would make it tied for the worst kicking percentage in the ACC last year. It's not very good, and it's not out of the blue either. And by the way, for this season, for that matter, Syracuse at 50% kicking rate, or at least kicking conversion rate, is dead last in the conference, or tied for dead last in the conference. We saw how this is now impacting Syracuse's game plan going forward. We saw it against NC State. They're going to be more aggressive. They're going to be more aggressive. If it's 4th and 5 at an opponent's 25-yard line, they're not going to settle for the field goal. I don't think they're going to settle for the field goal anymore unless they absolutely have to. Right? If it's a game-winning kick, a game-tying kick, they'll settle for it. But short of that, I think they're going to go for it if it's 4th and manageable, because both kickers have not shown to be able to hit field goals at a consistent rate. That's the reality. And hopefully that can be improved upon, you hope. But if not, the adjustment is what we saw against NC State. They're just going to be more aggressive on 4th down. That's just going to be how it is. They're going to operate like Brandon Staley did with the Chargers. The difference is that with Brandon Staley and the Chargers, that's the NFL. They have NFL kickers. They're going to make their field goals. Brandon Staley is just a doofus. In this scenario, it's less so about being a doofus and more so trusting the offense a lot more than you trust the kicking game. Hopefully it can be improved upon. If not, they're just going for it more than usual. A missed onside kick recovery against Georgia Tech. But credit to Syracuse, they recovered it against NC State with no problems. So I don't think that's going to be, hopefully that's not an issue going forward. It was just a one-time thing that I had to point out. And an illegal formation on a field goal attempt against NC State. And again, it was technically a penalty. I've explained the rule that the defensive tackle for Syracuse was in line with the shoulder of the center. I know it's not directly over the center, but really the rule is within the body of the center. And he was within the body of the center being shoulder to shoulder. You just can't have that happen. And it was on a 4th and 2. So really, the lesson here is that don't leave doubt. Right? If you go, you can't commit that penalty on a 4th and 2, or at least come close to committing that penalty and letting it be in the referee's hands, because it's 4th and 2. A 5-yard penalty gives the opponent a first down. Now, if it's 4th and 9, it's a little bit more stomachable because, hey, okay, it becomes 4th and 4. And you just retry the field goal. But in this case, it led directly to an NC State touchdown. All right, so going forward, just being more careful. Just be more careful on those attempts. No illegal formations or anything like that. But overall, these miscues are meant to show you that they have to improve the special teams. Because, yeah, Syracuse is 5-1. And again, we'll certainly take 5-1. But if they want to achieve their ceiling, right? And I think their ceiling is higher than what it was at the beginning of the season. Now that we have seen them through 6 games, I think it's higher than 10 wins. I think it's possible, probably unlikely, but it is possible they can run the table in the ACC with their schedule remaining. That can happen. In order for them to achieve that potential, I think the special teams unit as a whole must be better. Now, coming up, we talked about the good from the coaching staff on yesterday's podcast. On today's podcast, we're going to dive into the coaching and where they can improve. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And Syracuse football right now is sitting at 5-1, 2-1 in the ACC. So the Orange are in a pretty good spot. And I mentioned to you that I think Syracuse's ceiling is higher than it was in the preseason now that we've seen them through 6 games. Well, the Orange's odds to win the ACC on FanDuel are at plus 4,000. If you think that Syracuse can run the table and potentially win the conference outright, that would mean a trip to the college football playoff, by the way. That'd be pretty cool, right? If Syracuse football was in the playoff. Well, you can check it out on FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. I think for the most part, Syracuse football's coaching staff has done a very, very good job through 6 games of the season. But that doesn't mean that they are perfect, okay? They are not perfect, and that's okay. This is a brand new coaching staff. Not that Jeff Nixon is new to being an offensive coordinator, not that Elijah Robinson is new to being a defensive coordinator, but the head coach in Fran Brown is new to being a head coach. So overall, the staff in general is brand new. And so you would expect that there would be some growing pains. And once again, I pointed out the good of the coaching staff. I think the clock management has been really good through 6 games. I think finding ways to win in the face of adversity is really good as well. But this episode is about improvement. So where can the Syracuse coaching staff improve? And I think the number one way they can improve is by learning from the Stanford loss. To quote one of my favorite head coaches across any sport of all time, I am a Florida Panthers fan. Their head coach is Paul Maurice, and he said last year during the Stanley Cup final that you either win or you learn, right? You win the game, great. If you lose the game, well, you can learn a lot from a loss. And I think this Syracuse coaching staff can really learn from that Stanford loss, because let's set the scene of that game, all right? Syracuse was coming off a bye week. They were 2-0. They got a big ranked win over Georgia Tech, and they were feeling good about themselves. I was feeling good about them. We were all feeling really good about Syracuse football through 2 games, and then they fell flat against Stanford. They just did not come out ready to play. It's not that the effort wasn't there. The effort was there. They were flat. They didn't have it at the beginning of that game, and it forced them to play catch up for the entirety of the game, right? Remember that? They didn't come out ready to play. They fell behind 10-0 relatively quickly. Wasn't very good. And there was really no excuse to it, because, again, Stanford was also coming off a bye week. So you can't say that, Syracuse was out of rhythm and Stanford was in rhythm by playing the previous week. Nope. Both were coming off a bye week, and Stanford was the team that had to travel. Stanford had to travel all the way from California to Syracuse. Remember how everyone made a big deal about, oh my goodness, the ACC going to California. I mean, my goodness, what are these athletes going to do? How are they going to be able to survive a plane ride, right? They had to travel. There was no excuse in that game for Syracuse in that one, and they fell flat, and it cost them. Well, how do you learn from it, right? Let's think about the scenario that we're in right now. How about that? You win or you learn, right? This week, Syracuse football is on a bye. I think we'd all agree that we're feeling pretty good about the team, and they probably should be feeling pretty good about themselves. They've certainly recovered from the Stanford loss by winning 3 straight, getting another ranked win over UNLV, getting a conference win over NC State on the road, a game that they would normally lose, but they found a way to win. I think both games in past years they would probably lose, but they found a way to win against UNLV and against NC State. The other win was against Holy Cross. It's Holy Cross. So they're feeling good about themselves. Well, now they got Pitt. They got Pitt next week. This time it's going to be on the road. Pitt is also going to be coming off a bye. So the question is Syracuse going to come out better against Pitt than they did against Stanford? And maybe in that Stanford game, they took them for granted. They were feeling so good about themselves, and they took Stanford for granted because they're not a very good team. Stanford's not that good. Ever since then, I don't even know if they've won a game. Well, they can't underestimate Pitt. That's the good news, because Pitt is a ranked team, and they're going on the road facing one of the better passing attacks in the country. They got to be ready for that one. Once again, you win or you learn, and hopefully the coaching staff has Syracuse ready to play post-bye week against Pitt. Hopefully they do. Let's get off to a 14-0 start like they did against UNLV. That would be great. That would be terrific, right? Instead of falling flat on our face in the beginning like what happened against Stanford, okay? So that's where they can improve. Post-bye week, let's see how they respond, feeling good about themselves against Pitt, all right? A good team on the road. Number 2, defensive scheming in my mind can improve a little bit, okay? I'm kind of tired of the rushing 3 and dropping 8. I don't know about you guys. I think they got to kind of get rid of it because they run it far too often. There are scenarios where it's okay to rush 3 and drop 8, in my opinion. If it's a Hail Mary situation, right? If it's 3rd and 4th and forever. So I'm talking if it's like 3rd and 26 or 4th and 26, whatever it is, like rush 3, drop 8, play the sticks, right? Play that line to gain. Don't let anyone behind you there. That's okay. I get that. That's the proper times to do it. But too often times they play it in normal down situations, like a 3rd and 9, they'll rush 3 and drop 8. And aside from it working against UNLV in overtime, that one play, it doesn't really work. That's just the reality of it. A couple of reasons why I want them to stop this and at least rush 4 and drop 7 into coverage. Number 1, it's going to hurt the pass rush. You're only rushing with 3 guys. There's 5 offensive linemen on the other side. It's going to hurt the pass rush for the most part. Very hard to generate pressure when you're rushing only 3 guys. That's going to also hurt the secondary, right? Because Syracuse doesn't have the Legion of Boom back there. They don't. I don't think their corners are terrible, but they don't have the Legion of Boom back there. Help them out a little bit. Get a little bit more of a pass rush. And by that, I mean, don't just rush 3 guys. I think getting Marlowe waxed back is, again, it's going to help them because maybe Fadil Diggs can rush the passer more, but you get the idea. And we saw this bite Syracuse in the you-know-what against Stanford on that 4th and 9 play where they rush 3, they drop 8, they leave Alec Iomanner one-on-one on that 4th and 9. They get no pressure. Ashton Daniels makes a perfect back shoulder throw to Iomanner, and they made the catch. They got the first down. They won the game. Clarence Lewis, the corner, he had pretty good coverage on Iomanner on that one, but it was a perfect throw, perfect back shoulder. He was open, and they converted. Going forward against, again, teams like Pitt and teams like Miami, if you rush 3 and you drop 8 against Eli Holstein or Cam Ward and you give them all sorts of time to throw the football, they're going to pick you apart. You got to be able to do more than rushing 3 and dropping 8 unless it's an extreme circumstance like 3rd and 4th and forever, like 3rd and 25, 4th and 25. You get the idea. So let's hope that they steer away from the rushing 3 and dropping 8 on defense. All right. Number 3, not as much of an issue this year, but hey, we can still clean up the penalties a little. It's definitely better. It's better than in prior years. The numbers back it up. Syracuse is currently only bottom half in the country in penalties per game at 6.6. And the reason why I say only bottom half is because under Dino Babers, if they were bottom half in the country in penalties per game, that would be an amazing year for Dino Babers. Last year, for what it's worth, they were bottom 10 in the country in penalties per game. I believe it was 7.3. So the staff has done a good job of shaving a lot of penalty, almost a penalty per game off, but still 6.6, bottom half in the country. Let's improve that, right? We saw, again, I'm going to reference that Stanford game a lot because they lost against Stanford. And we saw on Stanford's, I believe, their first touchdown drive, they got good field position after an unnecessary roughness on Aronde Gadsden on a punt. That wasn't good. And then it appeared that Syracuse was going to get off the field on 3rd down, but they called a roughing the passer. Now, it was a kind of a controversial roughing the passer, but they called it. Don't leave it in the hands of the officials, I guess. I don't know. But regardless, got to clean up the penalties just a little bit more. All right. 6.6. It's not terrible, but penalties can bite you in the you-know-what if you are not careful. It's definitely an improvement over the Dino Babers teams, but it can still be better. It's not like we're setting a high bar here with the Dino Babers and penalties. Sorry to rag on Dino Babers a lot. He was a good person, good guy, but it was frequently an issue with Syracuse football and penalties under Dino Babers. Now, as far as future podcasts on the channel, tomorrow, we are going to shift our focus for one full episode talking strictly about basketball, okay? Because basketball season is not too far away. I know this has mostly been a football podcast for the last couple of months because, hey, we're in football season right now, but pretty soon basketball season is going to be here. The preseason ACC polls came out. Donnie Freeman didn't get a single vote for ACC Rookie of the Year. I have some thoughts on that as well. And a reminder for Syracuse basketball schedule. They play its first exhibition game on October 26th. Then they have another one, I believe, on October 30th. And then Syracuse basketball tips off another season on Monday, November 4th against Lemoyne at home. So stay tuned for that. Then on Friday, we got Poll Friday, which is what has been the most surprising part of Syracuse football season so far. So we'll shift back to football for Poll Friday on Friday. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On ACC podcast. Alex Dono and Kenta Gibbs, they keep it real, and they bring you the truth about where your favorite ACC team stands within the conference. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. And if you really liked it, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications so you know right away when I am dropping the next podcast. And everyone, take care.